2023 is likely to be a vintage year for superannuation funds, thanks to the big US tech stocks. Donald Trump barred from running in Colorado, meaning he can't run for president. And Apple decides on a change in strategy. Don't focus on the iPhone. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It's Thursday, the 21st of December, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. You've done your Christmas shopping?
Most of it. How about you?
Well, it's a funny question for you because you're an online shopper, though it frustrates you, but you like shopping in malls less than you like shopping online with you. And so if you haven't done your shopping yet, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I will be making a last-minute trip to a shopping centre just to get a couple of the things that I was not able to get. How about you? Have any of the things, because you told us a little while ago that you ordered a bunch of stuff, but the shipping dates were all like 28th of December or so. Anything arrived?
Incredibly, everything has arrived.
You're kidding.
I just got lucky. No, very, very fortunate.
Oh, you know what that is? That's a Christmas miracle.
That is a Christmas miracle. You're right.
Now, after the show, Sean, which is completely unrelated to Christmas miracles, but it's still worth sticking around for, you've got an interview coming up with Chris Meeker, who is the head of sales at Brighton Home Loans.
Yes, Chris tells us all about lending to not your typical home loan customer. It might be a small business owner or a sole proprietor or someone, people who really struggle to get home loans with the major banks. So Brighton Home Loans is one of the non-bank lenders who are doing a great job in actually providing loans for that cohort of people. It's a fascinating chat. We also go into more generally what's going on in the home loan market.
Yeah, and Brighton is a supporter of the podcast. It's a good interview coming up a bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, it looks like being a very good year for superannuation returns, with retirement savings accounts expected to grow by nearly 9% after big returns in the final 6 weeks of the year.
The Median Growth Fund, which has a 60 to 80% investment in growth assets, will rise by nearly 9%, 8.8%, according to research house Chant West. It's way better than last year when returns actually went backwards. Now, let's think about this. Superannuation is the $3.5 trillion sector in the Australian economy, about 3 times the size of the housing market. Along with the family home, it is by far the biggest asset for the vast majority of Australians. Also, 11% of our wage goes into super each pay packet. So, a 9% return is pretty good. Way better than owning a home in Melbourne or Adelaide, Hobart, Darwin or Canberra, and about the same return as you got for owning a home in Sydney and Brisbane this year. Mind you, Perth homeowners did a bit better. So a 9% return for super, that's okay.
Yeah, 9% is pretty good. Why? Why the rise in super this year?
Well, mostly it's because of technology stocks, especially in the US. A median growth fund invests in equities locally and overseas, particularly Wall Street. When you have the big technology companies like Nvidia jumping nearly 250% this year, not to mention Meta, owner of Facebook, up 180%, and Tesla up 135% this year, then you start to get an inkling of why super funds have done so well. Not surprisingly, some of the best performing super funds are those with heavy exposure to US tech. Super funds like MindSuper, UniSuper and Australian Retirement Trust. Of course, median funds have plenty of local equities as well, and the S&P ASX 200 is up 7% this year so far, mostly thanks to a very big surge in the past 6 or 7 weeks. So, Michael, there's a bit of a Christmas present in all this for anyone with a superannuation account, and that's pretty much all of us.
Yeah, nice to have a bit of good news for a change. Sean, you mentioned the surge in local markets. How did they go yesterday? Did the good run continue?
Sure did. In fact, another good day, and the S&P ASX 200 is within 100 points of its all-time high, which was reached back in August 2021. That was 7,632.8 points. At the moment, it closed yesterday up 0.7% to 7,537 points. With markets pricing in rate cuts in the US and eventually Australia, expectations about earnings from companies, particularly those in interest rate sensitive stocks, are growing. That's pushing the market higher. A couple of lithium stocks which haven't had a good year were the best performers yesterday, Sayona Mining and Core Lithium. They led the market higher, both rising more than 11%. James Hardie was again the best of the large caps. It has plenty of friends at the moment, finishing 3.6% higher. Its share price has now doubled over the past year. That is a good outcome. Telstra was another good performer yesterday, up 2%, while Woolies, Wesfarmers, Macquarie, Westpac and CSL all rose by 1% or more. Worst of the mega caps was Fortescue Metals Group. It dropped nearly 1%. But it is still the best performer of the very large stocks over the past year, up about 40%. In corporate news, Incitec Pivot said it will return $1 billion to shareholders via a buyback and special dividend following the sale of its Waggaman facility. Explosives and mining services giant Orica will buy sensors software and data group Terra Insights for about $560 million, and shares in property tech group PEXA fell 11% yesterday, the worst of the top 200, after it warned of uncertainties in its UK conveyancing business.
And what about international markets? What's happening there?
Well, comments on Tuesday night by a Fed official that the US central bank will cut interest rates if current progress on inflation continues helped equities. Then another official came out and said, while there's no urgency to cut, he expects lower rates next year. By the close, the S&P 500 was almost at a record high, while both the Dow Jones, which is the top 30 companies, and tech-heavy NASDAQ hit new records. Oil prices continue to edge up as tensions remain high in the Middle East and shipping continues to be disrupted in the Red Sea. The Aussie dollar hit a 5-month high yesterday of just under 68 US cents. That's on the back of a weaker greenback, and Bitcoin is trading above 42,000 US dollars a unit.
All right, we still have a bit to cover. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese spent $700,000 in the third quarter of last year in taxpayer-funded expenses after winning the federal election, with a big chunk being paid for international travel.
Number 2 most expensive politician was Leader of the House Tony Burke at nearly $400,000, and then Opposition Leader Peter Dutton at more than $363,000. Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek came in at $326,000, and Resources Minister Madeleine King at $319,000. Now, the latest data has been released from the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority. It hadn't published MPs' expenses since the middle of last year. The Greens and the Coalition have pushed for greater transparency. As a result, we got these numbers yesterday. I suppose it's not really a surprise that the Prime Minister spends a lot more than anyone else, but as you can imagine, the Coalition is on it already, complaining about how much Albanese is spending.
Also yesterday, Sean, Anthony Albanese indicated that Australia won't send a warship to join a new Red Sea task force, saying that the US is happy for Australia to provide diplomatic support.
Yes, this is about the global operation to combat attacks by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, which are disrupting global shipping around the Suez Canal. Yesterday, the Prime Minister condemned the actions of the rebels, but said the US understood Australia's preference for diplomatic support. The comments came after the Chief of the Defence Force, Angus Campbell, attended a virtual meeting with US Secretary of Defence Lloyd Austin and other members of the 39-nation Combined Maritime Force, which is based in Bahrain. Albanese yesterday did say that Australia will look at providing further personnel to that task force.
Now, Sean, the flooding in North Queensland will spoil crops, putting pressure on prices of things like mangoes and bananas.
Very bad news just ahead of Christmas. Cyclone Jasper triggered major flooding in the area in recent days, hitting hundreds of homes and cutting off main roads. The cyclone made landfall in the middle of last week, and the initial damage was expected to be light, but the system lingered and brought unexpected rainfall with up to 2 metres in 7 days in some areas. The rain fell over a really wide area. It hit sugarcane regions as far south as Tully. Tully's about 140 kilometres south of Cairns, and other farming areas growing bananas, mangoes, papaya and lychees. Dan Galligan, Chief Executive of sugar farming body Cane Growers, said the region hit by flooding accounted for about 20% of the industry's production. Prime Minister Albanese has announced a one-off payment of $1,000 that's available to eligible adults, and income support will be provided to small businesses. Meanwhile, Suncorp says it's received about 900 plus flood claims, and IAG said it's received 229.
Haven't the pictures, the images of that flooding been quite extraordinary? And there was some footage of a waterfall up there that was really just a bit of a trickle in the days before the cyclone hit. And now it's this raging torrent. It's just amazing to see, and the damage that it's doing is just incredible.
Phenomenal. And Cairns Airport, some of those photos of Cairns Airport with the planes not quite underwater, but certainly the landing gear and all that stuff was underwater. Quite amazing.
Yeah, really is. Now, KMD Brands, the owner of outdoor adventure wear retailer Kathmandu and surfing label Rip Curl, has blamed poor consumer sentiment for wiping out sales growth.
Its flagship Kathmandu stores suffered a 22% decline in sales for the first 4 months of fiscal 2024, with much of the pain coming from wholesale channels as volatile trading conditions and macroeconomic challenges saw many retail customers hold back from placing orders. That, along with slower sales growth in company-owned stores, really was a reflection of weaker consumer sentiment. Group sales for the first 4 months of the 2024 financial year were off 12.5% from last financial year, although the good news is that gross margins have shown some improvement.
Okay, turning to international news now, and some very big news out of Colorado in the US. That state's Supreme Court has ruled that former President Donald Trump is disqualified from holding office again because he engaged in insurrection with his actions leading up to the January 6th storming of the Capitol.
As it stands, it means Mr. Trump can't stand for election in the state of Colorado, meaning he can't run for president. The court is the first in the US to find that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which disqualifies people who engage in insurrection against the Constitution after taking an oath to support it, applies to Mr. Trump. It has never been used. It's actually a Civil War amendment, and it wasn't even used in the Civil War. The decision overturns a previous lower court ruling. It is probably the only one of literally dozens of court cases against Mr. Trump that has gotten to this point. Mr. Trump's team derided the decision, saying it isn't a surprise that an all-Democrat appointed Colorado Supreme Court has ruled against him, and indicated the former president will appeal to the US Supreme Court, which of course has a Republican bias because when president, Mr. Trump appointed 3 justices. So still a ways to go. But as we stand right now, Donald Trump isn't eligible to run for president.
Extraordinary. This is just the story that just keeps giving, doesn't it?
Sure does. Amazing story.
Now, Sean, I mentioned this one at the top of the show. Apple is set to do something in 2024 that it hasn't done in 15 years, not focus on the iPhone. Instead, the wearables business is going to get the attention next year.
The iPhone will still get an upgrade next year, of course. It's the company's most important product and still brings in about half of revenue, a bit more than that, according to Bloomberg. But there won't be major changes. Apple plans to retain the iPhone 15's design while increasing screen sizes on the Pro version. Lower-end models will get the Action button, and there'll be a new dedicated button for taking video. But it will be the company's wearables business, including the upcoming Vision Pro, the mixed reality headset, AirPods and Apple Watch that take centre stage. Now, the Vision Pro marks a new category for Apple, while the earbuds and smartwatch are poised to get some of their biggest upgrades ever. Apple's sales have been stagnant the past year following a surge in consumer tech spending during the pandemic. In fact, all of its major product segments, the iPhone, the Mac, iPad and wearables, suffered declines in fiscal 2023, which ended in September. So the company is pushing into the wearables, hoping that that will kickstart revenue growth.
Are you a wearables guy?
I am. I have a watch, I have AirPods, and I use them every day, all day. So I'm afraid I am. Are you?
I love the watch. Yes, I'm a big fan of the watch. I have never been able to get into the AirPods because I have funny shaped ear holes.
Oh, really?
And they never stay in.
Yeah.
So I've had to go off brand and find a different one, which for an Apple person, everything I use is Apple. It feels kind of a little bit wrong.
Very difficult.
Yeah. To be going elsewhere. But hey, if it doesn't fit your ear, not much you can do.
If you got ideas, that's what you got to put up with.
Yep, that's just what I have to do, Sean. All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. You're speaking with Chris Meeker from Brighton Home Loans, a supporter of the podcast.
Yep, all about what's happening in the home loan market, and particularly that area, the cohort where maybe you own your own business or you're a sole proprietor or someone like that, how you get a home loan when you're one of those guys. Much harder for those people to actually get a home loan with a major bank. And so people like Brighton and others in the non-bank home lending area cater to those people.
Yeah, it's a good one. It is up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 21st of December, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast, and you can join us online as well on LinkedIn, Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.